So this is Dan of Vagabond Awake. In this report, I'll share the two most American countries in Southeast Asia. I'll share some data as I go along, but my conclusion would be based on my gut feeling after 47 years growing up in the USA and now 17 years living overseas. There are two countries that I consider most similar to the United States. I will share the second most similar country first. Okay, question. What is the second most American country in Southeast Asia? The second most American country in Southeast Asia is the Philippines. I'll share similarities, what make me feel that, and then I'll share some differences, what make them different. Okay, starting out with similarities. When I first arrived there, I noticed that the Philippines were really into basketball. Every neighborhood that I went in had a basketball court and people were playing there, and all the neighbors were there watching. They're really into basketball. They're also really into boxing. You've probably heard of the Pac-Man. He's one of the best boxers who ever lived. And he's a Filipino. And the Filipinos are really into boxing, both themselves and they like to watch it professionally. And they're also into baseball. Those are three of America's most commonly watched and played sports in America. Other parts of Southeast Asia are not as into those big three, if at all. And so that's one of the big similarities. Next up is language. Now I'm talking about languages spoken in the home. The US population, 335 million people, 78% of the population speaks English in the home to each other, their parents, their children. 14% speak Spanish in the home, and 22% are bilingual. They speak a couple languages, whatever they may be. In the Philippines, it's 115 million people, and 55% of them can speak English. More can read and write, but speak it is 55%. And 28% of Filipinos speak Tagalog, or it's also known as Filipino. But there's many, many languages in the Philippines, all over the different islands. In fact, there's 130 different languages spoken in the Philippines that are from the different islands around there. And also, when Filipinos speak English, their dialect's a little hard to understand when you first arrive, but you'll pick it up pretty quickly. Okay, so language is very similar with the Philippines. What about music, like in nightclubs, bars, on the radio? The Philippines are into top 40, they're into rock, hip hop, electronic dance music, and they're very into karaoke. In the US, what is it? It's top 40, rock, hip hop, electronic dance music, very similar music that you'll find in the Philippines. Next up's religion. The US is 66% Christianity of one kind or another, and 27% unaffiliated, agnostic, atheist, or they just have no affiliation. And the rest are just smaller percentages that add up to 100. In the Philippines, Christianity is 86%, and it's primarily Roman Catholic. So there's similarities there with religion. What about grilled meats? What a crazy thing to say, right? In the US, 80% of Americans use grills to cook their meats or their fish. And it's not every meal, but they're very common to use, especially like in the summer. People love to grill their meats. In the Philippines, I couldn't find any published data on this, but my observations, I would say about 75% of Filipinos eat grilled meat every single day without fail. So that's another similarity food-wise. And then there's some similarities with violence. In the USA, the violence caused death is 5.9 people per 100,000 in population. That's 2018 data. In the Philippines, violence caused deaths was 6.5 per 100,000. Again, that's 2018 data. So there's some similarities there. And so that's the similarities between the US and the Philippines that I noticed after spending quite a bit of time in the Philippines. Okay, let's talk about some differences. One of the differences you'll notice right away is the roads, airports, sewers, and drainage. The US is not what it was, but overall the infrastructure is nicer than you'll find in the Philippines. Now, the Philippines has some exceptions. BGC, Metro Manila, those places are world class. But overall, as you travel around the Philippines and go to more middle-sized or smaller cities or smaller islands, you'll find overall that the infrastructure is not like you're going to find in the US. And it's true in the US too. In some parts where the states don't have as much money, the roads aren't as well kept up, and even in some parts where they do have a lot of money, they're choosing to spend money on other things. So the infrastructure not what it was in the US, say 20 years ago. What about Social Security? Social Security, the US, the average retiree's monthly pension is $1,862 US per month. This is a difference with the Philippines. The Philippines, the average retiree monthly pension is about 5,123 pesos, which is 87 US dollars. That is why in the Philippines, the Social Security is really about the family. Children tend to take care of their parents, and so that's one of the differences. The US, you put in a bunch of money your whole life and then you take it out when you're old. And that's often, that's a cultural difference, if you will, with the Philippines, because they're more focused on the family unit. It's not unusual in the US for people to move to different states from their parents and not to spend as much time with their family, but in the Philippines it's more family culture. Now, something about Social Security. If you decide to move to the Philippines or any other country outside the United States, once a year, once you're getting your Social Security check, if you establish a bank in that foreign country and have your Social Security check deposited into that bank directly by the Social Security Service, then once a year you're going to get this letter called a proof of life letter, and you have to contact the Social Security within a certain amount of time and let them know you're still alive. And there's different ways you can do that, but if you miss that letter, your payments could stop. So just a thought on that. I recommend you keep your US bank account and you have the money deposited in there and pull it out as needed. Now this stuff can change, these policies can change from time to time, but that's what my understanding of is now.
If you like my free ebook about how I fired my boss and traveled the world for 17 years and how I pay for things, come to Vagabond Buddha and grab the free ebook.
Now, the other thing is family support. Because the Philippines don't have the government support, it's often their family, as I said, that's taking care of them. And so if you go to the Philippines and you end up in a relationship with a Filipino, then you may be expected to help pay for their parents or whatever. And so that's one of the other issues with Social Security that's a difference that you wouldn't experience in the US. Okay, what about age difference relationships? My experience in the US is that wealthy people enter large age gap difference relationships, but overall you don't see much of it in the general population, middle or lower income people. In the Philippines, the age difference relationships happen in the Philippines because the Social Security provides very little security there, and so it's more of a survival thing. You'll see age difference relationships that come out of the need for survival. People are trying to survive, and so they'll often go into these age difference relationships. I'm not saying there aren't authentic relationships. There are. It's love, but it's often a motivation to go down that path in the first place. And finally, healthcare. This is another difference. The U.S. healthcare is decent countrywide, pretty much over the whole country, but it costs 3 to 5 times as much maybe as the Philippines. So it's very, very expensive. The Philippines, the best healthcare options are centralized in a few cities. Now I'm talking about the best. You have healthcare pretty much all over the Philippines, but your best and specialists are going to be in Manila, the Metro Manila area, and maybe Cebu and a couple other spots. And it's honestly, compared to other parts of Southeast Asia, those specialized hospitals, they seem to be a little overpriced as compared to most of Southeast Asia. So that is the Philippines, and those are the main issue differences I notice for those things. Okay, time for the number one. What is the most American country in Southeast Asia and why? Well, the most American country in Southeast Asia and why, I say, is Malaysia. And let me tell you why, the similarities and the differences. Now, Malaysia, let's talk about infrastructure first. Roads, airports, sewers, drainage, all of the things the government makes for the population. Again, the U.S. is declining, but it's still better than most developing countries. Malaysia's the finest in the world, their infrastructure, in Kuala Lumpur, and it's improving in smaller cities around Malaysia. So Malaysia has, I would argue that Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur especially, has better infrastructure than the United States. And there are parts of the United States that are approaching that, but Kuala Lumpur is world class. Let's talk about language. And Again, these are similarities now we're talking about. Spoken in the home, again, the US population, 335 million, 78% speak English in the home, 14% speak Spanish in the home, and 22% are bilingual, trilingual, or whatever. Malaysia, the population is 36 million, so only 10% of the people, roughly, that you have in the USA, and 70% of Malaysians speak English well. And so that is a big similarity. Let's talk about food. The USA the food is expensive, but it's high quality and the variety, including an abundance of international choices. Malaysia, moderate expense, but high quality variety, including an abundance of international choices. But if you eat local in Malaysia, it's not unusual to still find a $2 meal, or even lower than $2, but you have to eat in what are called mama's restaurants, and you're talking delicious food. So if you can learn what the quality food in Malaysia and eat local, it's very inexpensive compared to the US. Okay, so but the food is high quality and great variety. That is a similarity. So let's talk about healthcare. The US has world-class healthcare, but if you can afford it, but it's overpriced beyond all reason compared to both Western countries and Southeast Asian countries. It is a nightmare, healthcare is. Now, let's talk about Malaysia. World-class healthcare, but as much as 80% cheaper than the USA. So world-class is similar, but not the pricing. But the beautiful part is you're in Malaysia, you need to go to hospital. You're not worried about quality, and also you're not worried about language. You can talk to your doctors. Every doctor I've been to in Malaysia speaks English well and understands what I'm saying, and I understand what they're saying. And so that's a beautiful part of Malaysia. Let's talk about housing. Okay, US quality housing can be beautiful, but it's not affordable anymore. Whether it's buying or renting, it's kind of off, but you have the quality there. There are slum landlords, I think they call them, still in the US, but overall it's pretty good. And then let's talk about Malaysia. You have quality housing, just as beautiful, and it's still affordable to rent. Now, I would argue that buying is overpriced presently in Malaysia. I'm hoping for a dip so people can buy in the future, but prices to buy are too high given that the rent multiplier, which I talk about in other videos. Now let's talk about differences. Now, sports. USA, again, basketball, boxing, baseball, American football. Malaysia, soccer and badminton. So if you're into sports, there's not a sports culture there. You're going to have to go to an American sports bar if you want to watch the Super Bowl and that kind of thing. It's not going to be on TV much unless you buy one of these cable channels of 300 channels or whatever, and you're getting the American channels. So let's talk about music, nightlife and bars. The USA, again, top 40, rock, hip hop, electric dance music, country. Malaysia, electric dance music. Malaysian pop, Korean pop, Indian music, Chinese music. It's not, the music scene there really isn't, other than the electronic dance music. You will hear from time to time some American music in American bars and stuff, but you won't find it much around. The normal citizens are not listening to the same kind of music we do, although K-pop is kind of taken off in the US, as you know. Let's talk about age difference relationships. In the US, again, it's based on wealth often. You see it in other economic classes, but mainly it's, you know, a rich actor marrying someone, or a billionaire marrying someone quite a bit younger than them. In Malaysia, age different relationships, they're just not as common as many other parts of Southeast Asia, partly because their standard of living is higher, they make higher wages, so they can live a good life, and so they're more apt to you know, pick someone in their economic group because they're not worried about survival. Let's talk about religion. Okay, so in the US, again, Christianity, 66%, unaffiliated, 27%, and then the other religions share the balance. And then in Malaysia, Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, and Hinduism. Primarily Islam is the major religion there, but you have strong Buddhism, Christianity, and Hinduism, and you have an acceptance of religion there. which you don't have in some parts. I would argue even in the U.S., some religious groups are frowned upon, if not politically, but definitely socially. So some Americans are not interested in Malaysia because they have a bit of Islamophobia. But on the ground in Malaysia, people are pleasant to each other. There's not a lot of religious drama going on there that you see in other parts of the world. So Malaysia is a very interesting and fun place to live. And a lot of the drama that you see in other parts of the world, I don't see it there in Malaysia. So again, that's my own observations. Let's talk about violence. The USA, violence caused deaths. I already told you 5.9 per 100,000. Malaysia, violence caused deaths, 0.9 per 100K population. You're talking about 6 times more in the US, violence caused deaths. So crime is not an issue there. Again, let's talk about Social Security in Malaysia. The USA, the average retiree, I mentioned, $1,862 per month. Malaysia, the average retiree pension is 350 ringgit, which is $80. The same thing applies if you move to Malaysia and you get a Malaysian bank account, have your Social Security check deposited there. You're going to have to do the proof of life. I recommend keeping your U.S. bank account, have the Social Security deposited in there. And the family support issue isn't as big a deal in Malaysia because people make a little more money each month throughout their life. They put a little aside. And also the family unit, all of the members have jobs and are making decent money, so you don't have the same problem with older people. It's usually family members helping them, and so there isn't often as much. You don't have that survival mode because of the higher wealth there, and so that's some of the similarities and differences with Malaysia. So for me, it's a gut feeling. Now, I think when you first arrive in a country, the reason I say Malaysia is one is, if you think about it, when you arrive and land in a city, and now we try to use buses and Grab or Uber like that. We don't rent a car usually because we like to stay in the city center. But when you arrive, in the process of landing at an airport and then getting to your accommodations, if the airport's beautiful and the roads are beautiful and your accommodations are beautiful and the prices on everything are reasonable, you get a really positive feeling about a country. And so infrastructure plays a very strong early role in your perception of a country. That's why a country like Malaysia with a high quality infrastructure has an immediate response on your senses, and you sort of feel at home there, if you will. Contrary to the Philippines, which has other things that are very American feeling, the music, the sports, the family unit is strong in both countries. A lot of similarities with the Philippines, but they're not so in your face in a positive way when you first get there. And so I would say that the feeling when you first arrive in a country, and over time, it feels more like America to me in Malaysia than the Philippines does. So that's why I put Malaysia at number 1. But why don't you share with me, what are your thoughts if you've been to both countries? Which one do you think has more of an American feeling to it, the most American like, and put that below. And I will put, since Malaysia is my number 1, most American, I'll put the Malaysian playlist up here. You can watch some of my films from Malaysia. Thanks for watching.